I mean, Ed, as someone who's looked through our data, what do you think? Do you think they've got enough?
So I had used systems mass surveillance personally. I was an NSA analyst in Hawaii who had access to a system called XKeyscore, which is basically where all the products of mass surveillance that are related to, for example, computer-to-computer communications, everything you do on the internet, everything you type into a search engine, every email you send. XKeyscore is where it ultimately gets sort of filed into, so people can run their hands through it. And as I'm running my hands through this every day, the way it works is you've got basically a buffer of internet communications, site to site around the world that are at telecommunications providers. When you send an email to your mother, you don't send it over a line that you own. You don't have a cable running from your house to her house. So it has to go through somebody else's infrastructure. And the problem is governments realized that this was a massive vulnerability for everybody in society, where they could go, we're having trouble understanding what people are doing, and we'd like to know what they're doing. We'd like to know what everybody is doing all the time. Is there anything we can do about that? And they found out that it would be really difficult to listen to everybody's phone calls, to read everybody's emails with human eyes and human ears. So what they did was they went about devising a program, algorithms, computer systems that could do this for them procedurally, automatically. And the global sort of surveillance system that we have today is the system of this. And what's interesting is even the systems that are operating in the United Kingdom are often designed by the national security of the United States. So you're getting US spy equipment put in your country, and your government simply trusts the NSA to give them something that doesn't have a backdoor, that they won't abuse, that they won't use against the United Kingdom, for example. But even if they didn't, when you think about all of those things that are going over those lines all the time, it's not just you writing to your mother, it's not just you calling your therapist, it's not just you sending a text message to the person that you love or you sleep with. It's everything about everybody. And the government would argue that, well, because they're not listening to your phone call, they're simply intercepting it, they're making a record of it, they're making a note of everything that you're doing during the day, who you call, for how long you called them, where you traveled, what cell phone tower that your cell phone handset was connected to at your office, when you were sitting in your driveway, when you were sitting on the bus. All of this stuff is harmless. There was an argument that would say it's just metadata. But we know that's not the case because the director of the National Security Agency, former director, said we kill people based on metadata. And he's right. That's how we target our drone strikes. We don't have somebody on the ground looking at whoever we're shooting at. Rather, we fire at a cell phone that sent a text message or something like that that we don't like, that we assume is held by somebody else. The problem is that cell phone may have been held by a bad guy a week ago, a day ago, a month ago, a year ago, but then they could have given it to their child, they could have given it to their neighbor, they could have left it in town when they went somewhere else, because these are poor areas where they typically share things like that. And further on the metadata thing, a key point is people go, well, metadata by itself is harmless, it doesn't say that much, even though we use it for bad things. But the top lawyer of the National Security Agency, a man named Stuart Baker, said, metadata tells you absolutely everything about somebody's life. If you have enough metadata, you don't need enough content. And he's absolutely right. The way this works is that metadata is a proxy for content. You can reconstruct the activities of someone's life simply from the signaling events, when you call, where you go, what you do. And it's important when we've been, it's been 2 years, people don't really have a good understanding of what exactly was revealed. There were so many stories in the newspaper that were so complex that people didn't really understand what it all meant. And we had things that were easier to understand. For example, like the Prism thing, which is where all of the corporate logos on the top there that you see, Google, Facebook, Yahoo, Apple, all of these guys, they began working for the government rather than working for their customers. And providing not just the metadata of your communications, but the content as well, what you actually sent in email. But again, what does that mean when they have it all? And the answer is that it gives the government a window into anybody's life at anybody's time, at any given time. It allows them to do what's called pattern of life analysis. And this can be driven by an individual sitting at a desk like myself, or I can simply queue up inquiries, sort of continuing queries that look for anybody's activities who match a certain profile. Anybody who holds certain political views, anybody who associates with given activist groups. And what's interesting is that we see that the government isn't simply watching what we would consider violent radicals, jihadists, Islamists, things like that, who are known to be associated with violence. It can simply be people whose views they think are too extreme or they're not moderate enough, or even issues that they can't predict may become radicalizers in the future, such as climate change. And so the question is, do we really want the government watching everybody all the time? And I would say, even if you think there is some benefit there in terms of intelligence gathering, in terms of surveillance, watching our adversaries, you have to remember the fact that we have a proven history now that these programs are not effective in the United States. We're a little bit ahead of the game because we've had this. We've had the Boston Marathon bombings, for example, where the United States government knew who these individuals were in advance of the attack. They were already identified and known to the intelligence services. But despite the fact they were watching everybody in the country, they didn't thwart the attack. And the question is why? The answer there is because when you have individuals like me who are ultimately responsible for this, going into a desk every morning and trying to search through the world's communications from the previous day, the previous week, the previous month, you realize very quickly that if we collect everything, we understand nothing. And if we don't reallocate our resources in a targeted way, in a specified way, in a way that's based not on simply watching everybody without regard to guilt or innocence, but based only on a probable cause to interfere, to intrude into their privacy based on the expectation, an evidence-based approach, an articulable suspicion of criminal activity, we find that we're spending resources for no benefit in terms of public safety and a real cost in terms of freedom and liberty.
I mean, the picture that you paint is absolutely daunting, and I think anytime anybody hears you talk about it, it really brings these issues home as to why it really does matter. The problem is that it also sounds very complex, and it can be quite abstract, and it can feel very far away from ordinary people's lives when they are picking up their cell phone, when they are sending an email. They're not picturing an analyst on the other side actually reading that content. And in the questions that we had coming in on Twitter, a number of people raised this, and you've certainly heard the argument before, but for example, Immigrant 6 asking, some people think they're ordinary and they have nothing important for the government to look at, and why should they be bothered? And I do think that question is key to why in the UK especially, shifting this debate has been difficult.
It's a very important question. I'm glad you asked, because this is something that a lot of people struggle with when you're trying to talk to a friend about this, and they go, well, I don't care because I don't have anything to hide. I'm not doing anything wrong. First off, that's an argument about privilege. It's a misunderstanding of rights. You go, because of the fact that the right is not particularly valuable to you at a given time, because you are not threatening, you are not interesting, that it's not valuable for anybody. And also that it's not valuable for you, because you have no idea how the laws are likely to change in the future. You have no idea how the social norms are likely to change in the future. You could very likely find yourself in trouble, and regardless of whether you've done anything wrong or not, when the government knows everything about you, they can find something that you've done wrong, regardless of whether it was dangerous or destabilizing or anything like that. It's the famous Cardinal Richelieu quote, give me 6 lines written by the hand of the most honest man, and I'll find something in them with which to hang him. The problem is they don't have 6 lines anymore. They have 6 billion lines on all of us. But beyond that, let's presume that you don't have anything to hide. Let's presume you are sort of the least offensive, the least intimidating to the government type of person out there. They don't want to influence your industry. You're not in a union. You're not politically active. All you do is you go home and you watch TV. And you pay your taxes. That's also very important to them. If that were the case, you have to think about what it actually means when you change the paradigm there, because you as a citizen don't need to justify why you need a right. Rather, it's incumbent on the government to make a demonstration of why it is absolutely necessary to the public good to violate your rights. The burden of proof does not fall to you. And ultimately, when you think about the argument, you have to think about what they're trying to say and what it means. And when I look at it, it's no different to say, you know, I don't care about the right to privacy because I have nothing to hide. That's no different than saying, I don't care about free speech because I have nothing to say. I don't care about freedom of the press because I have nothing to write. I don't care about freedom of association because I'm not involved with my community. I don't care about freedom of religion because I don't worship. But the problem is when you give up these fundamental freedoms, when you stop defending these general collective rights, you're actually shifting the character of democracy. You know, when we think about the way that human rights work, they're not granted by governments. They're inherent to our nature. Government cannot simply say that, you know, you can no longer speak, you can no longer express yourself. And the problem with this is the fact that if we allow them to do that, we have subordinated ourselves in a new way. We have given up a measure of power that once we have done that, we have stopped becoming citizens and we have decreased ourselves into becoming subjects. Rather than becoming partner to government, we are subject to government. And that's a real danger because once you go down that road, once the government claims a new power, once they plant a new flag in the domain of your rights, your liberty, your private life, within the four walls of your home, your private friendships, your private records, it's very difficult to get them to go back. And once you've lost a certain degree of power, then you can no longer oppose that power. You know, there can be no revolutionary political movement when the government knows what everybody's doing, what everybody is saying, what everybody is thinking. And when we think about what that means, I think we have to be very careful about simply assuming that I, the individual, can give up the rights for the collective. The majority can't vote away the rights for the minority. And we cannot give up the foundation of all rights. And that's really what privacy is. When you think about it, privacy is not about hiding something. Privacy is about protecting something. Privacy is about protecting liberty. The right to privacy is what provides freedom of association. It's what provides freedom of speech. It's what provides freedom of the press, because you cannot decide what you think, what you feel, what you want to be, what you want to become, what you want to share, if you can't think about it in the first place, if you can't develop it, if you can't make mistakes with people you trust, with friends, and experiment and live in love. So when you think about the right to privacy, what you really need to think about is the right to liberty.